I'm Marlo Quinn, 35, and the scent of burnt turkey mixed uneasily with the sharper tang of simmering resentment. Grandma's dining room had always felt a little too large, the heavy oak table stretching like a stage. And today, I was the entertainment. David's laugh cut through the clatter of silverware. "Still tinkering with those little online projects, Marlo?" he said, his tone dripping condescension. "Or have you finally decided to get a grown-up job?" I swallowed hard, feeling my cheeks flush. "My company is doing fine," I murmured, though my voice sounded thin even to me. Sarah snorted, swirling her wine. "Fine," she says. "Honestly, you should be grateful Grandma keeps helping you. Not everyone has that safety net." The words felt like tiny barbs, each one lodging deep. I forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as brittle as it felt. "I'm building something real. It just takes time." "Oh, sweetie," Sarah cooed, laying a manicured hand on mine. "Time's exactly what you're running out of. Grandma's not going to be around forever, you know." My stomach twisted. The truth behind her syrupy tone stung worse than the words themselves. Across the table, Grandma sat quiet, her once sharp eyes distant. I hated how fragile she looked lately. David leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You always did like chasing dreams instead of money. That's cute, until the bills come due." I tried to breathe past the knot in my throat. Their laughter rose again, echoing off the ornate chandelier, leaving me small and exposed. I hated that they saw me this way. Weak, dependent, a punchline at Thanksgiving dinner. I caught Grandma watching me then, her gaze softening for just a moment. But just as quickly, it faded, replaced by a vague confusion that cut me deeper than David's words ever could. "Don't worry," Sarah said brightly, dabbing her lips with her napkin. "When the time comes, we'll make sure everything's handled properly. Grandma's worked too hard to see it all wasted." My pulse spiked. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. David chuckled, pushing back from the table. "Relax, Marlo. We're just talking about being responsible. Unlike some people." Heat crawled up my neck. I wanted to scream that I was responsible, that I'd poured every bit of myself into my company. But the words stuck, tangled with years of biting comments and forced smiles. Later, as I stood by the window, trying to calm my racing heart, I heard Sarah's laughter drift from the hallway. She really believes Grandma's still her safety net. Poor thing. Poor thing. The words pulsed in my head, leaving me cold. I pressed my hand against the glass, the darkness outside offering no comfort. 1,000 questions swarmed. What were they planning? What would happen when Grandma was gone? I didn't know the answers yet, but deep inside, a gnawing fear took hold, whispering that this dinner was only the beginning. Grandma Rose was the only one who ever truly saw me, not as the family ass dead weight or some drifting failure, but as a woman with ideas worth nurturing. I can still hear her voice, low and warm, calling me her brilliant little visionary, even when I came home with tear-streaked cheeks from another investor-s rejection. "Someday, Marlo," she'd say, patting my hand with those delicate fingers that had once signed half the city into prosperity, "all that stubborn hope will make sense." Her house was proof of that stubborn hope. A sprawling Victorian masterpiece on the corner of Rosewood Lane, crowded with oil paintings, antique lamps, and faint scents of cinnamon potpourri. It was more than a house. It was the soul of our family, the one place I felt anchored. I grew up chasing sunbeams across its polished floors, sneaking cookies from the ornate tins in the pantry, whispering secrets to Grandma in the shadow of her towering bookshelves. Everyone knew the house, and the fortune tied to it, was the centerpiece of her estate. David once called it the last great gold mine in this family, laughing like it was a harmless joke. Sarah would trail her fingers over the carved banisters whenever she visited, a speculative gleam in her eyes. I never thought much about Grandma's will. It felt too morbid, too cold. Even now, with her health declining, the notion of her fortune seemed distant, almost tasteless to dwell on. I didn't want her money, I just wanted her. But that didn't stop David and Sarah. They'd whisper over coffee when they thought I couldn't hear, their voices low but sharp. "Mom said she'd secure everything for us," Sarah once muttered, her hand clutching her phone like a lifeline. David snorted. "Better. She's probably already twisted that old lawyer around her finger. Marlo can keep her silly app. I'm taking the house. I remember how my stomach sank, a leaden dread settling there. Was Grandma truly just a transaction to them? Her legacy boiled down to marble countertops and trust funds? One evening, when the November wind howled against the windows, I curled up next to Grandma's chair. She was wrapped in a heavy quilt, eyes half-lidded but watchful. I tried to hide my tears. She reached for my hand, her grip frail yet somehow stronger than ever. "My Marlo," she whispered. "You always worry too much about being enough. You've always been my pride." "I don't care about the money, Grandma," I choked. "I just want you." Her smile was tired but genuine. "And that's why you'll always have my heart." A chill chased through me. Was her heart all I'd end up with? The thought haunted me as I tucked her in that night, the weight of her words lingering like a ghost. I couldn't shake it. What if David and Sarah were already planning something I couldn't stop? I always thought families tore themselves apart over petty misunderstandings, or maybe over jealousy that simmered for years. But now, watching my own blood circle around Grandma Rose like patient scavengers, I understood it was far simpler than that. It was money. It began quietly enough. David started showing up twice a week, then 3 times. He brought flowers, sometimes chocolates. His grin stretched wide as he leaned down to press a kiss on Grandma's fragile forehead. At first, I thought it was sweet. He'd never been the affectionate type. But then, his questions started slipping out, careful as a pickpocket's fingers. "So, Grandma, did you ever finalize that trust? Just curious, for peace of mind." Or, "You keep all your important papers here, right? Want me to organize them for you?" He'd glance at me then, his smile tight. I'd force one back, trying to pretend the skin at the back of my neck wasn't prickling. Sarah was subtler. She'd sit beside Grandma for hours, murmuring softly, her hand stroking Grandma's thin arm. She'd offer to help with bills, to review the insurance letters that piled up on the table. I caught her more than once, pausing just a beat too long on certain pages, her eyes skimming over numbers with an almost hungry light. When she looked up, she was all warm concern. "Oh, Marlo, I'm just making sure everything's in order. You know how easily older folks get confused." I nodded, my throat dry. Maybe I was overreacting. But the next morning, an old porcelain figurine was gone from the living room shelf. Grandma didn't seem to notice, and when I asked Sarah if she'd moved it while dusting, she laughed lightly, almost too quickly. "Oh, I think Grandma might have packed it away herself." Her tone was breezy, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. That night, I lay awake listening to the faint creaks of the house settling. Or was someone moving downstairs? I clutched my blanket tighter, feeling foolish. It couldn't be what I thought. Could it? Days blurred into one another. Grandma seemed smaller each morning, her skin papery, her voice thinner. I started making a point to sit with her whenever Sarah or David was around. They exchanged polite words with me, but something had shifted. I could feel it in the way Sarah's smile cooled, or how David's laughter grew strained. Then yesterday, I found an opened envelope on Grandma's writing desk. Her latest bank statement, half folded, a faint smudge where someone's thumb had pressed. I put it back exactly how I found it, my hands trembling. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe love was guiding them, not greed. But deep down, a cold unease rooted itself inside me. I couldn't shake the sense that Grandma's life was becoming a waiting game, and we were all unwilling players, circling the inevitable. As I left her room that evening, I heard Sarah whisper to David in the hallway, too low to catch. But the way they stopped talking when they saw me, the quick, guilty look, they didn't need to say a word. I suddenly wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. I can't get the way Sarah's voice cracked out of my head. The venom in her words as she spat at David. "She promised me the house," still rattles inside me like a loose window in a storm. And David's reply, sharp and low, had felt even worse. I caught only fragments, but it was enough. "You know how much that property is worth?" he growled. It wasn't love or loyalty binding them together. It was pure greed. When I stumbled into Grandma's study that afternoon, pretending to look for a book. They froze. Both their faces drained of color, then flamed red so quickly it almost looked rehearsed. Sarah forced out a brittle laugh and said something about finding an old family photo. David wouldn't meet my eyes at all. I nodded, made some stupid, hollow comment about childhood memories, and excused myself. But my hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped the doorknob. Outside, I pressed my back to the hallway wall, breath stuttering. Something is wrong. I've always told myself I was paranoid, that my instincts were leftover childhood fears. But that afternoon, I don't know. I felt like a small animal caught in the open, with shadows circling. Later, when I returned to the study, I tried to pretend it was nothing. I stacked Grandma's sewing patterns, sorted some old greeting cards. That's when I noticed it. A sleek, unfamiliar business card resting atop Grandma's ledger. Richard Hanley, probate attorney. My pulse spiked. Grandma never mentioned changing her will again, not after last Christmas. Why would she need a new lawyer? A prickle of fear crept down my spine and settled like ice in my stomach. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she just wanted advice. Maybe it had nothing to do with the house. Maybe. But doubt bloomed despite my best efforts to stomp it down. That night, I offered to help Grandma organize old photographs. My voice sounded too bright, even to me. She beamed, happy to have company, and I fussed with the boxes long enough to lull her. When she drifted off in her armchair, snoring softly, I went to her drawer. My hands didn't shake this time. I carefully swapped out a few of her important documents. Land titles, her last amendment, little things most people wouldn't notice at a glance. The copies were perfect to the eye, though I couldn't say exactly why I felt compelled to do it. Insurance, panic, maybe both. Then I placed a tiny brass owl on the bookshelf, adjusting it just so. Inside was a micro recorder, hidden in its hollow belly. A foolish, desperate precaution, or so I told myself. My heart ached at the thought of betraying Grandma's trust like this. As I lay in bed later, I couldn't shake the image of David's clenched jaw, or Sarah's narrowed eyes. What if tomorrow brought another secret meeting, another step closer to losing everything? I stared at the ceiling until dawn, wondering if I'd done enough, or far too much. Grandma Rose's decline was cruel in its swiftness. Just a month ago, she was shuffling through her garden, laughing as she teased me about my hopeless attempts at baking. Now she lay sunken into the vast expanse of her bed, her breath shallow, eyes glassy, drifting somewhere far beyond my reach. I clutched her hand whenever I could, terrified that if I let go, she'd simply slip away. The doctors had begun using phrases like comfort care, their voices soft, practiced in the art of delivering slow heartbreak. Every time I left her room, I had to press a hand against my chest to remind myself to breathe. It wasn't just sorrow that wrapped itself around this house. It was something darker, tighter. I caught David and Sarah whispering in corners, their tones hushed but their glances sharp. When they looked at me, their faces softened, dripping with sympathy that felt strangely performative. But when they thought no one was watching, their eyes flicked toward the study door, to the cabinet where Grandma kept her important papers. One afternoon, I found David in the hall just outside Grandma's room, holding his phone close to his chest as if shielding it. He jumped when I appeared. "Oh, it's just you," he stammered, offering a strained smile. "Checking in on Mom?" I nodded, words catching in my throat. There was an ache there, one part grief, one part dread. "She's been calling for you," I whispered. He only nodded, eyes darting back to the study door before he brushed past me. Later, Sarah sat at Grandma's bedside, speaking in honeyed tones about how everything would be all right. I stood by the window, arms wrapped tight around myself, trying to ignore the sour taste creeping up my throat. Grandma's eyes flickered, her lips forming my name, and I rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "I'm here, Grandma. I'm right here," I breathed. Her hand, papery and light, closed weakly over mine. "Don't." "Let them," she rasped, her voice barely audible. Tears stung my eyes. "Shh, don't strain yourself. I promise I'll look after everything." But even as I said it, I felt helpless. What could I possibly do against the silent machinery already grinding away in this house? David and Sarah were always just beyond the door, always watching, waiting. I was alone in this. Terribly, suffocatingly alone. That night, I sat by Grandma's bed long after everyone else had gone to sleep. Her breaths were slow, almost imperceptible. I laid my head on the edge of the mattress, clutching her hand as though I could anchor her here by sheer will. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned, pulse racing, half expecting to see Grandma's ghost. But it was only the dark hallway staring back. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real haunting in this house wasn't death. It was the living. The day of the will reading felt like attending Grandma's funeral all over again. Only this time there was no coffin, no flowers, just the suffocating finality of polished wood and cold, empty faces. I sat rigid in the ornate chair, my hands clamped together in my lap, trying to still their trembling. The antique clock on the wall ticked far too loudly, as though mocking me with each passing second. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, the sound slicing through the heavy silence. His gray eyes darted from me to David and Sarah, then settled on the crisp papers before him. As per the last will and testament of Eleanor Vance. I stared at the table's glossy surface, unable to meet anyone's eyes. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. David drummed his fingers, Sarah smirked faintly, and I wished desperately that I could vanish. He spoke of minor bequests, 1,000 here, a ring there, to cousins I barely remembered. My pulse roared in my ears. Then finally, Mr. Henderson's voice dropped. To my beloved grandchildren, David and Sarah, I bequeath the entirety of my estate, to be divided equally. It felt like the air was sucked from the room. My vision blurred. I clutched at the edge of the table to keep from swaying. My estate. Entirety. Those words shattered something inside me. Mr. Henderson paused, then continued with an almost apologetic sigh. To my granddaughter, Marlo Quinn, I leave a single, symbolic antique locket, as per her expressed wishes, and my concern for her financial prudence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even process it. My hands fell limply into my lap. Had there been a mistake? Surely he'd misspoke. I looked up, my eyes darting desperately to Mr. Henderson, hoping for some hint, some tiny, reassuring smile that this was all a cruel joke. But he wouldn't meet my gaze. David leaned back in his chair with a satisfied grin, his arms stretching behind Sarah as though claiming both her and his victory. Well, Marlo, he drawled, looks like you got exactly what you wanted. Sentimental trinkets for sentimental girls. Sarah let out a brittle laugh. I flinched at the sound. It was so sharp, so delighted. My throat constricted. I swallowed hard, tasting bitterness. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice so frail it barely carried. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat again, eyes full of pity now. Your grandmother was very clear in her final wishes. I'm sorry, Miss Quinn. The locket. That damned locket. A tiny weight against the crushing boulder of betrayal. I could almost hear Grandma's voice telling me to be strong, to keep my heart guarded. But how could I guard what was already shattered? David rose, patting Sarah's shoulder, and they walked out together, out of my grandmother's legacy, which now belonged entirely to them. I sat there, hollowed out, staring at the space they'd left behind. Somewhere deep inside, a cold, trembling question formed. What was I supposed to do now? The room spun so violently I thought I might faint. My fingers clutched the edge of the table, knuckles white, trying to anchor myself in a world that had suddenly tilted beneath my feet. The words, symbolic antique locket, ricocheted through my skull, each syllable like a cruel hammer blow. It was supposed to be mine. Grandma's whispered assurances on her deathbed. You're my true heir, Marlo. Don't ever doubt it. Had wrapped around my heart like a warm shawl. Now they unraveled, thread by agonizing thread. I blinked rapidly, willing the hot tears not to spill. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Not David, with his smug little smirk, and certainly not Sarah, who practically vibrated with glee under her syrupy facade. She pressed a delicate hand to her breast, tilting her head, feigning concern so poorly it was almost laughable. Oh, Marlo, Sarah crooned, voice dripping with mock pity. Are you all right? It's such a lovely locket, isn't it? Grandma always was sentimental, so thoughtful of her to give it to me. The locket dangled from Sarah's slender fingers, catching the light and throwing cruel little sparks into my eyes. I couldn't look away. My throat tightened painfully. I wanted to scream, to rip it from her grasp and demand the truth. How could my grandmother have betrayed me so completely? But my voice failed me. All that emerged was a strangled gasp. David's arm slid around Sarah's waist, pulling her close. "It makes sense, Marlowe," he said smoothly. "Grandma probably worried about your unstable moods. Sarah's always been the reliable one." My chest heaved. I fought to breathe, each inhale scraping like broken glass. Unstable moods? They'd been whispering about me, twisting every small stumble into proof of my fragility, of my unworthiness. Sarah tisked gently. "Don't take it so hard. It's only a piece of jewelry." But it wasn't. It was everything. It was Grandma's promise. It was security, legitimacy, love. Now it was all slipping through my trembling fingers. I managed a stiff nod, though it felt like my neck might crack under the effort. Of course, only a piece of jewelry. Sarah's smile widened, satisfied. David's eyes glinted with triumph. They believed they'd broken me. Perhaps they had. I could barely feel my legs. My heart thundered wildly, drowning out rational thought. I stumbled back a step, bumping into a chair. The world blurred again, and I realized I was shaking. I need some air." Without waiting for permission, I fled. My shoes clacked across the polished floor, echoing my frantic pulse. I pushed through the heavy oak doors into the corridor, the cool air slicing across my fevered skin. But the relief was fleeting. Behind me, their laughter rang out, low, victorious. A fresh spear of agony pierced me. Had Grandma truly abandoned me? Or was there some deeper treachery still to come? I pressed my palm to my chest, struggling to calm the riot within me. One thought burned through the fog. If they've stolen everything, what's left for me to lose? And in that hollow, echoing question, a terrifying possibility began to stir. The news of my disinheritance spread faster than I could have ever imagined. It was as if my family and our so-called friends had all been waiting, salivating for a scandal to feast upon. Everywhere I went, I felt it. In the lingering stares, the abrupt hush of conversations as I approached, the awkward, almost guilty smiles people offered me in place of genuine sympathy. At the grocery store, Mrs. Langley, who'd known me since I was a child, actually patted my hand as if I'd lost a parent. "Oh, sweetheart, life can be so cruel," she sighed, eyes brimming with false compassion. I forced a weak smile, swallowing the urge to scream that I wasn't dead, just humiliated beyond repair. The coffee shop was even worse. A cluster of young women from my old high school giggled at a table near the window. As I stood waiting for my latte, I caught snippets of their whispered mockery, something about me trading stock tips for pity dollars. I tried to hold my head high, but every step felt like I was trudging through thick, choking mud. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from distant aunts and uncles piled up, each more patronizing than the last. "We're so sorry to hear about your troubles, dear. If you ever need anything, well, within reason, please don't hesitate." Within reason. As if I might suddenly turn into a beggar, rattling a tin can outside their manicured front lawns. Even the condolence bouquets made me sick. I received 3 that day alone, each accompanied by a note with neat handwriting offering prayers and assurances that this, too, shall pass. I wanted to hurl them all into the trash, but I couldn't bear the thought of someone noticing and labeling me ungrateful on top of everything else. Worst of all was the shame. It sat like a lead weight in my stomach, growing heavier each time someone looked at me with either pity or poorly hidden delight. I was no longer Marlowe Quinn, the ambitious entrepreneur, the bright hope of the family. I was a cautionary tale, a headline without even a scandal juicy enough to redeem it. That night, I sat on my bed with my knees pulled tight to my chest, trying to block out the echo of whispers that haunted every corner of my mind. My phone buzzed once more. I nearly ignored it, but some desperate part of me still craved connection. When I read the message, my heart lurched. It was from Simon. "Hey, I heard what happened. Can we meet? I think there's something you should know." A fresh wave of nausea rolled through me. What could Simon possibly have to add to this nightmare? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a long moment, I considered deleting his message, pretending I'd never seen it. But curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the better of me. Sure. When and where? His reply came instantly. Tomorrow, noon, our old spot by the lake. As I set my phone down, a single terrifying thought pulsed through my mind. What else could possibly go wrong? Desperation makes your hands shake in the strangest ways. Mine trembled against the smooth surface of Ms. Davies's mahogany desk, fingertips leaving faint smudges. She sat across from me, glasses perched on the tip of her nose as she flipped through the copy of Grandma's will. Her office smelled faintly of lemon polish and stale coffee, a nauseating combination that only made my anxiety churn harder. "Ms. Quinn, I want you to take a deep breath," she said, her voice the practiced calm of someone used to heartbreak. "I know this is devastating." Devastating? My voice cracked. It's criminal. They manipulated her, I'm sure of it. I heard them whispering about the house, about assets. And then there was that unfamiliar lawyer's card in her study. None of this feels right. She pressed her lips together, then removed her glasses. "I believe you feel something unethical happened. Truly. But feelings aren't evidence. Legally, this document is airtight. Your grandmother's cognitive assessments were current. Notarized witnesses signed off on her clarity." I blinked hard. "So, that's it? I'm supposed to just accept that David and Sarah get everything while I get a—" My breath stuttered, shoulders collapsing inward. "A locket?" Ms. Davies leaned back, fingers tapping the arm of her chair. "Without clear proof of undue influence or fraud, contesting this will would likely end in an expensive losing battle. It could drain what resources you do have left. But what about the fights I overheard? David and Sarah arguing over who'd get the house. Doesn't that raise questions? Not enough. Families fight over inheritances all the time. Courts see it daily. It doesn't automatically prove they coerced your grandmother." I swallowed a hard lump, throat burning. My hands twisted in my lap. "So, you're telling me there's nothing to be done?" "For now, yes. I could look deeper if you insist. Maybe hire a private investigator, but it would be costly. And if they truly covered their tracks—" Her eyes softened with a pity that made me want to scream. "I'm afraid you'd only end up more heartbroken, Marlo." Heartbroken didn't even begin to cover it. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything warm inside me, leaving behind this cold echo that rattled with every breath. I nodded mutely, unable to trust my voice. She stood, offering a reassuring hand. I took it because I didn't know what else to do. "You're young, bright. Your grandmother loved you. That much is clear from how she spoke of you when she drafted this. Maybe her choices were meant to protect you in some way." Protect me? Or abandon me? I couldn't tell anymore. As I stepped into the hallway, my vision blurred. The overhead lights stretched into cruel white lines. Outside her office, the wind sliced cold across my cheeks. Somewhere deep inside, something restless twisted. What if David and Sarah weren't finished yet? What if losing Grandma's will was just the beginning? My apartment greeted me with a cold indifference that made my chest tighten. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing me off from the world. For a moment, I stood there in the dim entryway, just listening. To the silence, to my own ragged breathing. I had once loved this quiet, found comfort in it after long days. Now it was nothing but an echo chamber for my grief. I drifted into the living room, my fingers brushing the back of the old corduroy couch. It felt rough under my hand, like it was recoiling from my touch. A thin film of dust had settled on the side table. I realized I hadn't cleaned in days, maybe weeks. What did it matter now? My eyes landed on the small framed photo of Grandma Rose and me at the botanical gardens, both of us laughing, her arm wrapped tight around my waist. My throat burned. I picked it up, tracing her face with my thumb, aching for the warmth of her voice, her steady certainty that everything would always work out. That was before I knew how fragile that promise truly was. I wandered into my bedroom, letting my hand drag across the dresser. It knocked lightly against the stack of coding books I'd poured my life into. Quantum Leap Innovations was supposed to be my future, our future. Grandma had believed in me when no one else had. Every late night at that cramped little desk, chasing down stubborn lines of code, had been lit by the hope that one day I'd give her back even a fraction of what she'd given me. But all that was gone. Stolen in a way that was crueler than outright theft. It wasn't just about the money, though that loss gnawed at me too. It was the betrayal. The realization that family ties could unravel so quickly under the strain of greed. I'd trusted them. God, I'd trusted them all. I sat at my desk, running my hands over the smooth wood, remembering how it had once seemed to vibrate with possibility. Now it felt hollow, just another dead thing in a room full of ghosts. The apartment seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing tighter with every breath. A soft buzz broke through my stupor, my phone lighting up with an incoming call. For one wild moment, I hoped it was Grandma, impossibly calling to tell me this had all been a mistake, that she was fine, that we could go back. But it was only Sarah. Her name on the screen twisted something inside me. I watched it blink until it stopped, leaving me in darkness again. A strange numbness settled over me. Maybe this was just how things ended. Not with a final shattering crash, but with a long, slow hollowing out. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling, wondering if there was anything left worth fighting for. Then, faintly, from the hallway outside, I thought I heard footsteps pause at my door. A shadow slipped beneath the crack of light. My breath caught. Was I really alone? I never realized how creative David and Sarah could be when it came to cruelty. They didn't have to slam doors or scream obscenities to make me feel small. No, they preferred softer, sharper knives. Like yesterday, when David called out of nowhere, his voice syrupy sweet. "Just checking in on you, Marlo. You know, Sarah and I finally decided on the marble countertops. The kitchen's going to be spectacular." I could almost see his smug grin through the phone. I tried to keep my voice steady. "That's nice. I'm glad the house is coming along." "Oh, it's more than coming along," he chuckled. "It's a masterpiece. Grandma would have loved it. Pity you won't get to see it up close. Construction zones are dangerous, you know." His words slithered around me like cold vines, squeezing my chest. Before I could muster any reply, Sarah's voice broke in from the background, high and laughing. "Tell her about the pool, David." "Oh, right," David continued, almost forgetting I was still on the line. "We're putting in an infinity pool. Sarah wants one of those fountains too, completely over the top, but why not? It's not like we're strapped for cash." I swallowed, throat raw. "That sounds extravagant." "Life's too short to live modestly," Sarah chirped, snatching the phone. "We're headed to Bora Bora next month, can't wait. I'll send you pictures." The line went dead before I could even say goodbye. I stood there for a long moment, phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing like a wasp. Then it all went silent. A silence so complete it felt like it was mocking me. True to her word, Sarah sent pictures later that evening. A carousel of bright, glossy images, her tanned legs on a yacht, David popping champagne, their new convertible gleaming in the sun. Each photo was a tiny dagger. They'd taken everything Grandma built and twisted it into a trophy, parading it around just to watch me squirm. I tried to convince myself that I didn't care, that material things were meaningless. But there was something so obscene about the way they flaunted it. Grandma's house, Grandma's money, even Grandma's little heirlooms were probably gathering dust on some fancy shelf, stripped of any soul. One night, unable to sleep, I texted David, "Do you ever feel guilty? Even a little?" His reply came instantly, almost like he'd been waiting. "About what? Making sure Grandma's memory lives on in style? You should have tried harder to be her favorite." I dropped the phone and covered my mouth, trying to hold back the sob that clawed its way up. It felt like my insides were unraveling, like there was no solid ground left to stand on. But even through the tears, a question gnawed at me, sharp and insistent. Just how far were they willing to go to keep everything for themselves? And what if, despite everything, I was still standing in their way? Days had lost their shape, slipping past in a gray, sluggish smear. I barely left the couch anymore, let alone my apartment. The idea of stepping outside, of forcing myself to interact with a world that kept hurtling forward while mine had shattered, felt impossible. Even the simplest tasks, Showering, making tea, answering the door, demanded energy I couldn't muster. So when my phone buzzed against the coffee table, I almost ignored it. Most notifications these days were meaningless. Grocery sales, appointment reminders I couldn't care less about. But habit won out, and I picked it up, thumb sluggishly unlocking the screen. It was a text from an unfamiliar number. For a moment, my pulse stuttered. Then I saw the signature at the end. Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, decades, really. She'd moved across the country ages ago, popping up occasionally with awkward birthday cards or stiff Christmas letters. We weren't close. Honestly, we were barely family. The message was startling in its casual tone. Heard about Rose. Don't worry, Marlo. Remember that old saying about where there's a will, there's a way? I read it twice. A third time. My first reaction was confusion, laced with irritation. Was that supposed to comfort me? A tired old saying, tossed across the miles like a bandage for a wound that needed stitches. It felt flippant, careless. Grandma Rose was gone. The family was splintered. Everything I'd leaned on my whole life had been ripped away. How could a saying like that possibly help? But something in the phrasing made me pause. Where there's a will, there's a way. Of course it was a cliché. But why emphasize that particular saying? Why not just offer condolences or tell me she was thinking of me? Why this oddly pointed message? My eyes drifted around the dim apartment, landing on stacks of unopened mail, the withering plant by the window, the half-empty glass of water on the floor. I shook my head. I was spiraling, reading too much into meaningless words. Aunt Carol probably didn't even realize how it sounded. Or maybe she did and just meant to encourage me in the vaguest, most generic way possible. Still, a tiny, inexplicable flicker stirred somewhere deep inside me. A feeling that wasn't quite hope, but wasn't pure despair either. It was so faint I almost missed it. Maybe it was simply the novelty of hearing from someone outside this suffocating circle of grief and suspicion. Or maybe my exhausted brain was starved for any thread to hold on to. I set the phone down, pressing it gently into the couch cushion like it was something fragile. I tried to let it go, to pull the heavy blanket of numbness back over me. But Aunt Carol's words lingered, whispering through the quiet like a ghost. Where there's a will, there's a way. Was there something I was supposed to understand? As I stared into the darkness of my apartment, a shiver ran through me. For the first time in weeks, I found myself wondering what tomorrow might bring, and if it could be something other than sorrow. The sterile scent of burnt espresso and antiseptic tile was almost laughably mismatched with the adrenaline sparking through my veins. I sat at a small corner table in the cafe, fingers drumming lightly on the surface. Every inch of me buzzed with electric satisfaction. When Aunt Carol walked in, I almost let my composure crack. Almost. Her smile was soft, but her eyes, those razor-sharp emerald eyes, gleamed with recognition and delight. She approached with unhurried grace, sliding into the seat across from me like we were just two relatives catching up over lattes. "You've outdone yourself," she murmured, voice low, conspiratorial. I let out a breathy laugh, feeling my entire spine straighten as if shedding a months-long weight. "It's time, Carol." They took the bait. The words tasted rich on my tongue, thick with months of hidden triumph. I leaned back, rolling my shoulders, savoring the shift in my own posture. No more fragile little Marlo. No more pitiful sighs, tearful eyes, or shaking hands. That mask had served its purpose, and oh, how flawlessly I'd worn it. Carol's grin was a thing of quiet savagery. Every last one of them. I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet, tapping until the screen bloomed with complex graphs and a labyrinth of legal signatures. The antique locket was never just sentiment. It held a micro SD card with the original will, digitally signed, time-stamped, and encrypted, completely irrefutable. Meanwhile, the copy David and Sarah proudly flaunt, their crowning masterpiece of fraud. Carol's eyes danced. And your symbolic clause, genius. They never questioned it. They saw a wounded girl, too overwhelmed to protect her own interests. I smiled, slow and sharp. I knew they'd underestimate me. I planted that language myself when I ghostwrote Grandma's correspondence, guiding her to unknowingly sign updates embedded with digital markers. All the while, I recorded every discussion in her study. Her concerns, their whispered manipulations, documented, neatly cataloged. My heart thundered. Not with fear, but with savage glee. How many nights had I lain awake, rehearsing every fragile breath, every tremor in my voice? How many times had I forced tears until my eyes burned, so they'd believe I was shattered, clueless, lost? Carol reached across the table, squeezing my hand. They'll be blindsided. By the time the courts are done, they'll be lucky to afford a dingy apartment together. I let her hold my hand for a heartbeat longer. Then I pulled it back, cool composure settling over me like a tailored cloak. I didn't just want retribution. I wanted them to drown in their own arrogance first, to believe they'd won. Outside, the sun cut through heavy clouds, throwing fractured light across the cafe floor. I stood, pocketing the tablet. Come on, Aunt Carol. It's time to dismantle their little empire, brick by deceitful brick. She laughed, a low, feral sound that thrilled me. As we walked out together, side by side, I felt it again. The electric hum of destiny finally snapping into place. And somewhere deep inside, I whispered to the girl I'd pretended to be, "Thank you for being so very convincing." Carol sat across from me, her wide eyes darting between my hands as I carefully spread out the final set of documents. The dim lamp carved shadows across the polished oak, lending the scene a conspiratorial intimacy that I savored. She looked as if she was torn between awe and terror. I couldn't blame her. "This," I began, tapping the topmost sheet with a perfectly manicured nail, "is the heart of it all. The antique documents Grandma signed, they were never just old papers. I embedded them with digital watermarks, tiny forensic signatures completely invisible to the eye, but undeniable under scrutiny." Carol swallowed hard. "So, the will David and Sarah tried to push has no such marks?" I finished smoothly. I leaned back, allowing myself a slow, victorious smile. "Which means, when these are examined, and they will be, it'll be glaringly obvious that theirs is a crude forgery." Her mouth opened, then shut again. I could almost see the cogs grinding behind her eyes. "But how did you even think of this?" "Oh, Carol," I laughed lightly, though there was nothing gentle in the sound. "I've been building this for years, watching them, recording them." I slid my phone across the table. With a single flick, I brought up the files. The first audio clip crackled to life. Grandma's study, David's oily voice whispering, "If she refuses, we'll just convince her. Old hands are easy to guide." Carol flinched. I let it play a little longer, Sarah's syrupy tones dripping venom. "Once Marlowe's out of the way, it'll all be ours. She's too fragile to put up a fight." I paused the recording. The silence that followed was profound. A delicious chill curled through me. Every greedy whisper, every incriminating promise, they're all cataloged, filed, ready to detonate. She offered me a grin, fierce and proud. "All these months of your performance, of letting them think you were beaten, Marlowe, it's masterful." A pleased warmth spread through me. Not relief. This was beyond relief. This was victory crystallizing, sharp and undeniable. They underestimated me. That's always been their greatest flaw. They see my compassion as weakness, my dreams as foolishness. It never occurred to them that I could see the long game. We returned to the audio. David again, voice low but smug. "Just make sure Marlowe gets nothing. I don't want her sniffing around the finances. She'll ruin everything." My smile was slow, deliberate. "He has no idea how right he was. I've already ruined everything, for them." Carol laughed, a quick, breathless sound. "So what's next? The recordings alone could bury them. We could walk into any lawyer's office tomorrow." "No." I shook my head. "Not yet. I want them tangled so deeply in their own deception they can't claw their way out. I want their arrogance to seal the final lock on this trap." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I trust you." As we sat there in the quiet hum of the equipment, the screen still showing their ugly confessions, I felt an electric thrill. They thought the storm was over. They couldn't see the real one gathering just beyond their sightlines. I tilted my head, a question forming. Carol, what do you think they'll do when they realize who's been orchestrating it all along? It was astonishing how easily people could be guided, like moths drawn to the faintest glimmer. All it took was the right nudge in the right shadowed corner. By now I had gathered enough threads, records, receipts, whispered contradictions, to begin weaving a net around them. But the trick was never to get my hands dirty. Not directly. Yesterday, I stood at my kitchen counter, slipping the tiny flash drive into a padded envelope. Inside, the audio file was sliced and disjointed, fragments of David's greedy prattling over the phone, Sarah's soft confessions to her husband that didn't quite match her public stories, nothing outright damning on its own, but to a trained ear it would sing of deceit. I addressed the envelope to Mr. Henderson, Grandma's old lawyer, careful to print in block letters that bore no resemblance to my usual cursive. When I handed it to the post clerk, I offered a polite smile, hiding the electric thrill running through me. That small package would soon land on Henderson's immaculate desk, and knowing his appetite for uncovering legal messes, it wouldn't sit unopened for long. Later that evening, I dialed a prepaid phone, my heart calm and steady. The number belonged to Aaron Holt, a local investigative reporter known for chasing down family scandals with almost gleeful zeal. Hello? Her voice was brisk, suspicious. I don't have long, I said, letting a slight tremor seep in. I have reason to believe there's a major inheritance fraud involving the Bryson family. I can't say more, but you should look into the validity of a recent will. Start with Grandma Rose's estate. You'll find more than enough to raise questions. A pause. Then her tone sharpened. Who is this? Are you... I hung up, cutting the connection clean. The silence afterward was intoxicating. I pictured Erin scribbling furiously in her notebook, already plotting out how she'd sell this to her editor. And Henderson, methodical, suspicious, would be pawing through the evidence by tomorrow, poking holes where they least expected it. It all felt like a beautifully laid chessboard. Each move was slow, deliberate, never betraying the hand that set it in motion. Meanwhile, David and Sarah continued their petty bickering, blissfully unaware that the ground beneath them had started to crack. I perched by the window with a mug of tea, savoring the steam against my face. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, bathing the quiet neighborhood in soft amber. It was almost peaceful. Almost. My phone buzzed on the table, another message from Sarah, dripping with forced concern. Hey, just checking in. Haven't heard from you. Hope you're okay. I stared at it for a long moment before deleting it outright. Let her worry. The real storm hadn't even begun. As I set the phone aside, a low laugh escaped me. It startled me with how light it sounded. They still thought I was defeated, adrift and harmless. Oh, if only they knew what I had truly set into motion. It's almost comical how quickly arrogance turns to panic. I've listened to the latest recordings at least 3 times, savoring each breathless pause, every sharpened accusation that passed between David and Sarah. I could practically see their faces twisting, eyes darting, hands clenching. Their perfect little empire was starting to list, cracks spiderwebbing through the glossy facade they'd been so eager to flaunt. Henderson's asking too many goddamn questions, David snarled on the line, voice brittle with stress. Why does he suddenly want copies of Grandma's old financial ledgers? I gave him everything before. Maybe because you didn't, Sarah shot back, her tone shrill. I imagined her pacing the marble floors, nails digging into her palm. You always cut corners, David. Maybe he found something missing. There was a beat of silence, thick enough to taste. Then David exhaled, low and ragged. And now there's this reporter sniffing around. He showed up at the dealership, asking about the down payment on the Maserati. Said he was investigating potential misuse of inherited assets. I smiled, teeth catching my lower lip. That was faster than I'd expected. I'd chosen my tip-offs carefully, planting enough breadcrumbs for a hungry journalist to follow. And clearly, he'd begun to feast. So, what do we do? Sarah's voice wavered. Not the imperious, icy queen I remembered. No, she sounded almost small. That gave me a peculiar satisfaction. Should we lie low? Sell the car? Sell it? David nearly barked a laugh. Do you want to look guilty? No, we stick to our story. We play dumb, and we pray this doesn't go anywhere. Play dumb? She echoed, incredulous. You've always been better at that than me. Another silence. Then the click of a door, muffled footsteps. A chair scraped. Don't start on me now, David hissed. Not when we need to look united. Oh, please, Sarah spat. Don't pretend we're on the same side. If this falls apart, I'm not going down with you. Their fragile alliance was fracturing, exactly as I'd hoped. Pressure did that. Exposed old resentments, revealed hairline fractures in even the most polished of veneers. I leaned back in my chair, letting the satisfaction wash through me. It wasn't over yet, not by a long stretch, but the tide had finally turned. I closed my laptop, fingers brushing the small hidden drive where I'd stored every piece of incriminating audio. Insurance, though honestly, by now it felt more like a trophy. Each whispered threat and careless boast was another jewel in my private crown. Still, I couldn't grow careless. A cornered animal is often the most dangerous. And if David or Sarah suspected how deep my hand ran through their unraveling mess, there'd be no telling what they might attempt in desperation. I rose, heart thrumming, not with fear, but with electric anticipation. The real storm hadn't even hit yet, and when it did, I intended to be safely out of the way, watching them drown. I hadn't expected to see Marlene at the charity gala. Then again, it was exactly the sort of gathering she lived for, small enough to feel exclusive, large enough to guarantee a fresh batch of gossip. She fluttered over to me the moment our eyes met, her bejeweled hand brushing my arm with exaggerated affection. Marlo, darling, she cooed, tilting her head, the sympathy on her face a little too rehearsed. How are you holding up? After everything with poor Rose? I let my shoulders slump, eyes darting nervously around the room as though ashamed to meet hers. It's been hard. I still don't really understand any of it. Oh, sweetheart. She squeezed my hand, rings biting into my skin. Your grandmother adored you. I was shocked when I heard how things turned out. My breath hitched, just enough for her to notice. I clutched her hand tighter, then let go, bringing my fingers to my lips like I was trying to steady them. I don't know what happened. Grandma and I were so close. And now, well, David and Sarah seem to be doing just fine. New cars, renovations, extravagant dinners, while I'm left here questioning everything. Marlene's eyes sharpened behind her concern. I swallowed hard, letting tears gather, blinking quickly to make sure one slipped free. I probably shouldn't say this, I whispered, lowering my voice. But I heard Mr. Henderson, Grandma's lawyer. He's been asking questions. About the will. Really? Her voice pitched up with barely contained excitement. Yes. I twisted the delicate strap of my purse. I hope there's nothing wrong. I'd hate to think David or Sarah might be in some kind of trouble. But it all feels off, doesn't it? Marlene leaned in, close enough that her perfume made me lightheaded. Oh, darling, if there's even a whiff of impropriety, people will know. These things never stay hidden for long. I just wish I understood. I sighed, voice trembling. It's like Grandma left me nothing but questions. And David and Sarah, they've been so evasive. It's probably silly, but I'm scared there's more going on than I realize. Oh, Marlo. She patted my cheek. You poor thing. I'll keep my ears open, of course. You deserve the truth. I managed a small, wounded smile. Thank you, Marlene. That means more than you know. When she finally drifted away, undoubtedly eager to share her new tidbit with anyone who'd listen, I stood by the champagne table, feigning an absent stare. Inside, though, my heart fluttered with a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. What had I set in motion? Had I done the right thing by voicing my fears so publicly? As I watched Marlene whisper to another woman, hands gesturing animatedly, my stomach twisted. This would spread, fast. And once certain people heard, there would be no calling it back. Still, I couldn't deny the tiny spark that lit inside me. Maybe, finally, the truth, whatever it might be, was about to claw its way to the surface. Watching them unravel was more delicious than I'd ever imagined. I sipped my tea by the window, phone in hand, replaying the voicemail from the bank's fraud department. David's voice cracked with desperation as he tried to sound composed. It was almost charming. Almost. "Miss Quinn," the banker had said after, "thank you for your cooperation. We'll proceed with freezing the suspect accounts immediately pending the investigation." I'd smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. Now, days later, I could practically taste the fear radiating off David and Sarah like sour sweat. Through the thin walls of their estate office, helpfully bugged by yours truly, I heard Sarah's shrill voice ricochet. "It's your fault, David. Your stupid spending, flaunting that new Jaguar when we're under a microscope." "Oh, don't pin this on me," David barked back, voice raw. "You were the one who insisted on the Italian villa. You said we had to look respectable, remember?" A small, dark laugh fluttered from my chest. Respectable. They'd mistaken vulgar opulence for class. Typical. The journalist's article had landed that morning, splashed across the local paper's front page. Photos of their parties, the yacht weekends, the suspiciously timed purchases, all accompanied by meticulous comparisons to Grandma's modest withdrawals during her final months. The narrative was so damning it barely needed embellishment. From the corner of the room, my tablet lit up with an alert. Another transaction denied, another desperate claw at vanishing funds. I didn't bother hiding my grin. Sarah's sob broke through next. "What are we going to do, David? They're investigating everything. What if they look closer at Grandma's will?" "They won't," David snapped, though his voice wavered dangerously. "We were careful. I made sure the paperwork was flawless." "Flawless?" Sarah's voice cracked high and hysterical. "You were drunk half the time you filled out those forms." Their words tangled into an ugly cacophony, accusations, curses, shallow promises. I leaned closer, my heart drumming with cold excitement. This was it, the glorious point where alliances shattered and desperation took hold. I closed my eyes, savoring every syllable of their downfall. Their empire, so arrogantly built on greed and fraud, was collapsing under the gentle weight of my carefully planted seeds. A single whisper here, a delayed statement there, a suggestion to a curious reporter. It had all bloomed into this exquisite chaos. Outside, rain began tapping against the window, soft and relentless. I wondered if they even noticed the storm, or if their entire world had shrunk to paperwork and fear. Then David's voice dropped, low and cracked. "We have to find a way to get more money. Fast, before they seize everything." A delicious shiver coursed through me. Let them scramble. Let them reach for lifelines I'd already severed. I pressed my fingers to my lips, stifling a laugh. How far would they go to save themselves? And when would they finally realize they weren't merely unlucky? They were hunted. And I was right here, waiting to finish what I'd started. David and Sarah were circling the drain now, their once smug composure cracking under the weight of public suspicion and the relentless murmur of scandal. I'd watched it unfold with a kind of cold, clinical pleasure. Each headline, each frozen bank account, each wary look from their so-called friends was a silent tribute to the elegance of my plan. But it wasn't finished yet, not quite. I sat by the bay window in my study, sunlight pooling around me, my pen gliding smoothly across thick cream stationery. I crafted every word with meticulous care, savoring the subtle barbs hidden beneath polished formality. The letter bore Mr. Henderson's letterhead. His approval had been easy enough to secure after all I'd revealed. It read, "Mr. David Lohr and Mrs. Sarah Lohr, you are formally requested to attend a critical meeting at Rosewood Estate to discuss new developments regarding the inheritance matters presently under review. Your presence is necessary to clarify unresolved issues that may significantly impact your standing. The meeting is scheduled for Thursday at 6:00 p.m. Immediate response is appreciated. Sincerely, Thomas Henderson, Esquire." I paused to admire it, imagining how Sarah would lean over David's shoulder, eyes bright with greed and thinly veiled terror. A lifeline dangled in front of them, so they'd think. The wording was delicate, expertly poised between threat and promise. A solution to their troubles, a chance to reclaim the illusion of control. I knew exactly how desperately they wanted that. When Carol entered with tea, she hesitated at the sight of my smile. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice hushed, almost reverent. I folded the letter with deliberate slowness. "It's done. By tonight, they'll have it in hand. And by tomorrow, they'll be planning what smug little faces to wear when they walk through Grandma's doors, still believing there's some clever scheme left to save them." Carol shivered. "Do you ever feel guilty about how far this has all gone?" I looked at her, truly looked, until she dropped her gaze. They would have taken everything from me, without blinking. My home, my security, my grandmother's love reduced to a means for their comfort. They don't deserve guilt. They deserve justice. And that's exactly what I'm giving them. She nodded slowly, though her fingers twisted the edge of her apron. I almost pitied her. Almost. Later, as I sealed the envelope and handed it off to be couriered, a delicious shiver raced through me. The final act was set. The stage, Rosewood's grand sitting room, still echoing with memories of happier days. The players, two greedy, frightened souls who still thought themselves clever. I leaned against the doorway, heart thrumming not with nerves, but with exquisite anticipation. Would they recognize the trap when it finally snapped shut around them? Would they beg? Or would they still cling to arrogance until the end? Either way, I'd be there to watch it all unfold. And that, more than anything, made every dark step worth it. I heard their voices before I saw them. David's strained attempt at charm, Sarah's brittle laughter slicing through the hallway. They stepped into Grandma's living room like they still owned it, shoulders squared, eyes darting over the antique furnishings as if searching for some comfort in the familiar. "Ah, there you are." David's grin was thin, oily. "What's all this about, Marlowe? We've had a long drive." I returned his smile with something serene, almost pitying. "I'm sure you have. Please sit. Mr. Henderson is joining us, and Detective Lyons." Their eyes flicked nervously to the gray-haired attorney seated near the fireplace, then to the detective standing by the mantel, arms crossed, badge gleaming at his belt. Sarah sank into a chair with forced poise. David hovered beside her, trying to mask the twitch in his jaw. I folded my hands neatly. "We're here to discuss the real will." David let out a sharp bark of laughter. "The real will? Marlowe, haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? Grandma's affairs were settled. It's over." My heart thrilled at his arrogance. "No, David, it isn't." I pressed the small remote in my palm. Hidden speakers crackled to life. "You sure you forged it exactly? We can't have any mistakes." David's voice, unmistakable, brittle with greed. "Relax," Sarah's smug tone followed. "The old bat's signature was shaky anyway. No one will know. Besides, I can't wait to see Marlowe's face when she realizes she's cut out for good." The color drained from Sarah's face so quickly I thought she might faint. David staggered, mouth opening and closing like a hooked fish. "Well, what is this? Where did you get—" I ignored him, reaching into my pocket to withdraw Grandma's delicate locket. I popped it open, carefully extracting the tiny micro SD card nestled inside. "This," I said, holding it up between my fingers, savoring their wide, horrified eyes, "contains Grandma's digitally signed will. Her true wishes, preserved with biometric encryption that only unlocked after her death. A failsafe. She was much sharper than you ever gave her credit for." Mr. Henderson nodded gravely. "I've reviewed it myself. The estate is left entirely to Marlowe, with very specific charitable bequests. There's also a clause addressing any fraud, which, thanks to this," he gestured toward the speakers, "will hold up beautifully in court." Sarah's lips curled into a snarl. "You conniving bitch!" Detective Lyons stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. "David Lohr, Sarah Lohr, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and will forgery. Please stand." The slap of handcuffs was sweeter than any symphony. As they were led away, Sarah shot me a murderous glare, David's face crumbling into a mask of ruin. I stood there in the fading afternoon light, the locket warm in my palm, pulse steady, breath calm. But as the door closed behind them, a darker question coiled through me, sending a shiver down my spine. Now that my revenge was complete, what exactly was left of me? The flashing blue and red lights carved garish shapes across Grandma's old driveway, bathing the hydrangeas in surreal color. I stood beneath the creaking porch awning, arms folded loosely, the night air brushing my skin with gentle promise. Below me, David and Sarah writhed in handcuffs, their once smug faces twisted in shock and desperation. "Wait! This is a mistake!" David bellowed, spit flying. "You can't do this to me! I'm a Lore! You don't know who you're dealing with!" I almost laughed. How many times had I heard him say that phrase, usually right after signing a deal he didn't understand or dismissing one of my carefully researched warnings? It was practically his mantra. Sarah clutched at the sleeve of a stone-faced officer, mascara smeared in grotesque rivulets. "We didn't do anything wrong. She tricked us somehow. She finally spotted me. Our eyes locked. I tilted my head, offering the faintest of smiles. It wasn't mockery, just acknowledgement. We'd reached the inevitable conclusion of a story they never realized I was writing. When the officers nudged them toward the waiting squad cars, David's gaze snapped to mine, wild and disbelieving. "Marlo, tell them this is all some misunderstanding. We're family." "Family," I repeated softly, savoring the word on my tongue. I stepped down a creaky stair, close enough that he could see every ounce of cool satisfaction in my eyes. "Funny? That's exactly what I relied on?" His eyes narrowed, confusion twisting into realization. "You did this?" I leaned in just enough for only him to hear. "You always thought I was the naive dreamer, didn't you? The fool chasing fairy tales. But it turns out, David, that you were the one living in fantasy. You built a castle on fraud and arrogance, and it just collapsed." He jerked back like I'd slapped him, muscles straining against the cuffs. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You think they'll keep listening to your lies?" I only shrugged. "They aren't listening to me. They're listening to your own voices on a dozen recordings, reading your forged signatures, following the money you so kindly laundered under your names. This was never about my word against yours. It was always about your deeds, and you made sure they were very, very public." Sarah sobbed then, a raw animal sound that echoed across the old lawn. The police nudged them into the cars, doors slammed, engines rumbled to life. As the taillights vanished into the night, a profound silence fell. No pity twisted in my chest, no anger burned behind my ribs, just a bright, clean certainty. I drew in a slow breath, tasting the crisp air. The reckoning was complete. But as I stood alone on that porch, heart calm and pulse steady, a sharper thought crept in, like the first spark on dry tinder. What would I do next, now that I knew exactly how easy it was to destroy someone? It's strange how the world looks different when the chaos finally subsides. Months have passed since everything came undone, since I exposed the truth, reclaimed Grandma's legacy, and watched the vultures scatter. Now, standing on the porch of Grandma Rose's house, which is truly my home, I breathe in the summer air, sweet with jasmine and cut grass. The weight that once pressed on my chest is gone, replaced by a lightness so profound I almost forget how it used to feel. Inside, laughter spills from the kitchen. Aunt Carol is trying her hand at one of Grandma's old recipes, a peach cobbler that somehow ended up more on the counter than in the pan. She catches my eye and shakes her head, giggling like a girl. It warms something deep in me. She has become more than family. She's the anchor I didn't know I still needed. My phone buzzes on the hall table. A quick glance shows a message from one of my engineers at Quantum Leap Innovations, updating me on the latest breakthrough. The company has soared beyond my earliest dreams, attracting investors who once dismissed me outright. Sometimes I wonder what those skeptics would say if they could see us now. If they could see me now. But the thought only brings a small, satisfied smile, not the bitterness it might have once. I walk into the study, Grandma's old sitting room, now my quiet sanctuary. Her portrait hangs above the mantel, gentle eyes forever watching. I like to think she sees what I've done with her legacy. The foundation bearing her name has already funded 7 young women launching their own tech startups. Each story that crosses my desk feels like a quiet triumph, a ripple of change spreading outward. I run my fingers along the spine of a leather journal on the desk, the one where I meticulously mapped out every phase of my plan. The lies I wove, the mask of heartbreak I wore, necessary performances to secure the truth. I don't regret any of it. Not the tears I forced, not the nights I let myself seem broken. All of it led here, to this unshakable certainty. In the evening, my friends gather on the back patio, glasses raised, voices bright. They're not bound to me by blood, but by choice, and that makes it purer somehow. No hidden agendas, no silent wars over money. Just laughter, shared stories, and hands that reach for mine without expectation. I step outside, letting the screen door creak closed behind me. The sun dips low, painting the sky in molten gold. For the first time in so long, I am exactly where I want to be, with exactly the people I want around me. I close my eyes, breathing in the promise of this new life. There are still mysteries ahead, still roads I haven't yet imagined. And for once, that unknown doesn't scare me. It thrills me,